You've probably walked into a conversation with one clear thought in your head: I need to say this well. And somehow, that thought never helps. Instead, you leave the conversation replaying everything. That sentence you shouldn't have said. That pause that felt too long. That moment where you weren't sure if you sounded confident or awkward. The strange part is this: the more you try to sound good, the less natural you feel. Your words get heavier. Your mind speeds up. And the connection you wanted to create quietly slips away. You might have told yourself this is just a confidence issue, that you need better communication skills, that one day, when you're better at talking, this feeling will disappear. But what if the problem isn't that you don't know how to speak? What if it's that you're trying too hard to control yourself while you do? This isn't a video about tricks, scripts, or sounding impressive. It's about understanding the hidden habit that makes communication harder the more effort you put into it. Because once you see that habit clearly, the pressure you feel every time you open your mouth starts to loosen in a way you probably didn't expect. There's a pattern almost no one notices while it's happening, because from the outside, it looks like you're doing everything right. You're paying attention. You're choosing your words carefully. You're trying not to say the wrong thing. But internally, something subtle shifts. The moment you decide you need to say this well, your attention turns inward. Instead of being with the other person, you start monitoring yourself. You listen to your own voice more than theirs. You judge each sentence the second it leaves your mouth. You try to predict how you're being perceived in real time. On the surface, you're still in the conversation. Underneath, you've stepped into self-surveillance. This is the invisible pattern. Communication turns into self-management. Your brain stops asking, "What's happening here?" and starts asking, "How am I doing?" That shift matters more than you think, because once your attention is split like that, your mind can't respond naturally anymore. It's busy checking, adjusting, correcting. You're no longer reacting to the moment. You're reacting to yourself inside the moment. You can feel this when your thoughts get ahead of your words, when you forget what you were about to say mid-sentence, when you smile or nod out of habit, not because it's genuine. When the conversation feels strangely effortful, even though nothing is actually wrong. This isn't because you lack social ability. It's because you've trained a habit of over-monitoring. And the more important the interaction feels, the stronger this pattern becomes. Because the more you care about saying the right thing, the harder it is to stay present enough to say anything naturally at all. Until this pattern is seen for what it is, every attempt to communicate better just tightens the same loop. More effort, more control, and less ease. There's a cost to this constant self-control that most people don't notice right away, because it doesn't feel dramatic. It feels responsible. It feels like you're trying to do things properly. But here's the truth. The more you try to control yourself while speaking, the more disconnected you become from the person in front of you. When your focus is on not messing up, your nervous system shifts into protection mode. You're no longer there to connect. You're there to avoid risk, avoid sounding stupid, avoid awkward pauses, avoid giving the wrong impression. And when avoidance becomes the goal, your words lose their warmth, your timing gets stiff, your responses start to feel slightly delayed, like you're always half a step behind the moment. People don't always know why this feels off, they just feel it. Conversations become polite but flat, safe but forgettable. And you walk away with a strange kind of fatigue, even if you didn't say much at all. That exhaustion matters. Because over time, your brain starts associating conversation with effort and tension. Not because talking is hard by nature, but because you've been doing two jobs at once: speaking and constantly evaluating how you're speaking. So, without realizing it, You begin to hold back. You speak less. You wait longer. You avoid situations where you might have to perform. And the most damaging cost of all is this. You slowly stop trusting your own instincts. You start believing that unless you prepare, rehearse, or control yourself, you'll say the wrong thing. Every interaction becomes a test you feel you have to pass. Control can give you a brief sense of safety, but the price is presence. And without presence, no amount of effort can create real connection. Here's the part most advice never tells you. The skill you're missing isn't speaking well. It's staying present when you don't know what to say yet. We're taught, directly or indirectly, that good communication means having something ready. A smart response, a smooth sentence, a clear point. So the moment there's a gap, a pause, a bit of silence, a second of uncertainty, we rush to fill it. Not because we have something meaningful to add, but because silence feels like failure. But that gap is exactly where real communication lives. When you allow yourself not to know the next sentence immediately, something important happens. Your attention shifts outward again. You actually listen, not to prepare a reply, but to understand what was just said. And from that understanding, a response starts to form on its own. Not perfectly, but honestly. This is why conversations feel so different with people you're comfortable around. You don't plan. You don't perform. You pause without panicking. You speak from what you're noticing, not from what you think you should sound like. And because of that, the exchange feels alive instead of forced. The real skill, then, is tolerance. Tolerance for a few seconds of uncertainty. Tolerance for not sounding polished. Tolerance for letting the conversation breathe instead of controlling it. This skill doesn't make you instantly impressive. In fact, it can feel awkward at first. But it does something far more important. It rebuilds trust in your natural responses. It reminds you that you don't need a script to participate. You just need to stay long enough for something real to emerge. If there's one practical shift that changes everything, it's this. Stop preparing your response and start tracking your attention. Right now, most of your effort goes into what you're about to say. You're scanning your mind for the right words, the right tone, the right timing. That habit keeps pulling you out of the moment. So the real adjustment isn't verbal. It's attentional. As the other person is speaking, notice where your focus goes. The moment you catch yourself rehearsing, gently bring your attention back to what's actually happening. The sound of their voice, the pace of their words, the emotion underneath what they're saying. This anchors you back into the interaction instead of into your head. Then, when it's your turn to speak, resist the urge to rush. If nothing comes immediately, let that be okay. A short pause doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're giving your system time to respond instead of forcing it to perform. Most people overestimate how awkward silence feels to others and underestimate how grounding it feels to stay present through it. A simple way to practice this is to respond to what you genuinely noticed, not what you think would sound best. That might mean reflecting something small, asking a simple question, or saying less than you normally would. These responses don't feel impressive, but they feel real. And real responses invite real connection. This isn't about doing less forever. It's about doing less control. Each time you choose attention over preparation, you reinforce a different habit, trusting that you can meet the moment as it is. And the more you practice that trust, the less effort communication requires. Not because you've learned better lines, but because you've stopped fighting the flow of the conversation. At this point, a part of you might be pushing back. You might be thinking, "This sounds right, but when I try it, I just feel awkward." Or, "If I don't try harder, I'll come across as boring or slow." That reaction is normal. It doesn't mean this approach isn't working. It means you're stepping out of a pattern that once kept you safe. For a long time, control helped you cope. It gave you something to hold on to in situations that felt uncertain. So when you loosen that control, your mind interprets it as risk. It sends doubt. It tells you something is wrong, not because it is, but because it's unfamiliar. The discomfort you feel isn't a signal to stop. It's a sign that you're no longer relying on autopilot. You're asking your nervous system to stay present instead of retreating into overthinking. And presence always feels exposed at first. This is where many people give up. They assume that if they were doing it right, it would already feel smooth. But growth rarely feels smooth at the beginning. It feels slower, quieter, less certain. That doesn't mean you're regressing. It means you're learning a new way of relating. You don't need confidence right now. You don't need proof that this will work perfectly. All you need is permission to be imperfect without immediately correcting yourself. Because the ability to stay with that uncertainty, without panicking, without performing, is not a weakness. It's the exact muscle you're trying to build. You're not becoming someone who talks more. You're becoming someone who doesn't need to perform to be heard. That shift matters more than any technique. Because when you stop trying to sound impressive, you start sounding real. And real is what people trust. Real is what people remember. This isn't about fixing the way you speak. It's about changing the relationship you have with silence, uncertainty, and not knowing the perfect next sentence. You're learning to stay present instead of managing an image. And that's a different identity entirely. From this point on, consistency matters more than confidence. You won't always get it right. Some conversations will still feel awkward. That's not failure. That's evidence you're no longer hiding behind control. So here's the only action I want you to take. In your next conversation, don't try to sound smart. Don't try to be interesting. Just stay with the moment 1 second longer than feels comfortable before you respond. That pause is where clarity starts to replace control. If this way of thinking resonated with you, stay here. Reflect on it. Practice it. And keep choosing presence over performance.